Alright, so here we are with a very simple tutorial on how to turn a color map into a spec map. Now, what I have here is it's a blend shader attached to a knife, and here's a fairly simple texture color map on it. So I've already exported it on over to Photoshop. And what I like to do is I will duplicate a layer just in case I want to go back to the original. And there's a real straightforward way to start this, and that is by attaching a hue saturation and killing the saturation so you just have this black and white. This allows you to look at the highlights and the recesses, right? So things that are light are going to be shinier, and things that are black are going to be darker. Now, in this case, we want to probably darken a lot of these pieces. And one of the easiest sort of approaches is to just sort of come in here. This is a very straightforward way to do it. Let's go ahead and already I kind of gotta combine these two because I need to have control over this. So I'm gonna just commit to having a black and white layer, a grayscale layer here. So layer, and I'll merge those layers together. So I have a black and white layer, and I will come on over and grab the dodge tool or the burn tool, either one. Dodge tool is going to lighten things, burn tool is going to darken things, right? So if I grab that burn tool, make sure that I kind of got this nice soft brush. It gives me a little more control. You can use a hard edge brush, but I think that's better to come back and kind of detail things with. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here, and I'll set this to be, actually midtones is probably fine, but you can control if it hits shadows, midtones, or highlights. So I'm going to start with midtones and then adjust my brush size down a little bit. And the exposure can probably go up. I can probably set that exposure to like a 70 just to give it a little more power. And kind of come through here and kind of choose little areas to kind of hit up with this. Get into like the crevices and nooks, but maybe leave some of the other parts a little lighter. So it's almost like I'm painting in crevices with this brush. I like a lot of hand paint approaches to things here. Right, and I'm going to kind of just, some of it I want to be a little lighter. But we're going to have to get really dark with it, which means I might come back and do a contrast in a moment. Probably most of this. I don't think much of this needs to be all that bright. Darken up a lot of this. And now at this point I've got kind of enough. Well, here's one. Let me get this one too. Let me get the highlights on this. I want this darkened up too. Alright. So the back end, maybe a little bit. So now I can kind of swap to like the shadows, and the strokes that I make will really just hit sort of the shadow points and really push some of that specular aspect. Yeah, see? Get a nice solid sort of darkening through there. And honestly, that might be almost good enough. I can kind of open up another layer. It might be worth it to kind of keep an eye on this one and undo maybe a little bit. Maybe I went a little too dark. So let's test it real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Save As. And I'll save it as, well, just for speed's sake, I'm going to save it as a JPEG. Normally I would save as a PNG because it'll have higher quality. I'm going to save as a JPEG just to make this go by real quick here, super fast. So knife, color, spec as a JPEG, and then kind of go back to here, and we'll attach it to the specular color under the blend. Most things have an essential specular color for shaders, something that will represent that. In this case, for a blend, it is the specular color. Knife color spec. You kind of see that right there. You see how it's got this nice sort of light pattern to it, which is nice. I like to take the diffuse down when I'm kind of moving around. You can. I don't have any light set up in here yet, so the render is going to be terrible of it. So I'm just sort of using the general viewport 2.0 to get an idea of what I'm looking at, sort of in real time. It's okay. It's not. You're going to need tweaking, just because that viewport render is only partially accurate. It's more like kind of like it's a real-time render engine trying to emulate that. Ooh, this is really dark at the tip. So let's try and get that a little brighter, right? We'll go back in. It is really dark up here. So maybe if I kick it back a little bit. Well, you know what? Since I'm doing it with this, but let's kick it back a little bit. Let's say it's a little lighter. At this point, I could take more of exposure or contrast setup and play with the contrast levels, which will give me, you know, like really intense sharpness, which is really good too, because now I've got this really strong light and darks. It's almost like a black and white image at this point, which is kind of what you want. That's what Maya will recognize the strongest. So there you go. Real simple little adjustment on brightness and contrast. Now if I save it out as let's say again JPEG, and we'll call this one knife color 2, and I'm gonna go ahead and take this knife and I'm gonna duplicate it so we can have 2 different looks at it, and I'm gonna go ahead and go to my little knife here, and I'm gonna duplicate it as well, the entire shading network, and we'll call this one knife shader. Well, we'll name it knife shader 2, so we can kind of look at the comparison here. So in knife shader 2, set this off to the side here. We'll go into the specular color, and let's go ahead and put that spec. Oop, did I not save it? Ooh, I might have accidentally saved it as knife color. Yeah, I saved it as knife color 2. So let me rename that real quick. Hopefully I can. It might not let me. Knife spec 2. Right, there we go. Let's get that on there. Alright, so now the difference in the two is with these settings, they have the same settings. You can see there's a lot more shine on this top one than on the bottom one. It's just a little more, it's stronger, right? It's got a little more strength to it. The handle looks a little shinier. The blade looks a little shinier, and it kind of feels appropriate. And I can go back here and kind of adjust that eccentricity as well. Uh-oh. Oops. Alright, so apparently I forgot to attach the shader. So when I was saying it looks stronger, I was wrong. Let's attach this knife 2 shader. There you go. There, it's a lot stronger. Maybe a little too much, right? So now the difference is that there's way more shine on there than on the bottom one. I can kind of get the same if I pump it up, but like let's say I set these both to a 0.3 with a 1 specular roll. I don't think that 1 specular roll is super great, but let's say it's a 0.7 specular roll off, and then for this one I set the same thing, 0.3 with a 0.7, which I was already close to. Notice now you can see a big difference in the two, right? This one's a lot more shiny, almost too shiny in a lot of ways. But that it gives me more to work with though, so I could tone down the specular setup, and I could kind of pinpoint that setup a little bit more, so that I have like it's a little tighter or whatever I want to do to it. See, it's just got more reflective light happening on it. And that gives you a little more room to kind of mess with some of the settings. And of course, the higher you kind of set the specular roll off here, the more it's going to feel metallic-y. Like if I turn this all the way up, that's oddly, you can't get away from the shine. So you want that eccentricity to be a little lower, maybe extra low even. See, now it's got kind of more of a plasticky almost finish to it. Or maybe a weathered bone. It's close to what I'd like to maybe see on it. Like it's been dug up and polished and it's displayed in a museum. Nice sort of worn handle and stuff. So, you know, it just depends on what you're kind of going for. Right? So I would argue that going with the this stronger sort of highlight setup, where you get almost this black and white, is really the way to go with that. Let's go ahead and save that out real quick. As a PNG for future use, knife spec. I'll call this one knife spec 2. This is the naming convention out of Crazy Bump, which I will talk about a little bit more later. All right.